Okay, so this is just going to be an internal pop the hood video to show some of the systems that make the Shadows platformer run the way that it does. So the first one I'm going to look at here is going to be a custom audio player that I wrote up in the vein of the audio player they showed off in the Unite 2016 talk. So what it does essentially is it randomly selects a clip from an array of clips that I can be any size that I want. It's stored in an array because I didn't want it to be a list. I don't really intend to add sound effects at runtime. And it will play it with these settings. It has a volume range that it can randomize between minimum and maximum, and a pitch range that it can randomize between again. And play test sound that I have here for the custom inspector that I've written up, that if we just click this, you can very rapidly see how the sound effect is going to come out in the game, and you can make changes. Like if I wanted the jump to be a little bit louder, you can just do that and play this again. It's pretty simple to make that change. Allows me to iterate very quickly, especially with events that are particularly hard to test, like the player dying sound. Falling out of the world that many times is very annoying and time consuming, so I wrote up that test button. Moving on, we can see the audio player working in the game. This is used for pretty much every sound that plays, barring audio sounds. And you can see it's randomly getting the pitch and volume for those sounds. It's also working on the ground, which we'll cover later. Maybe I should disable my session mockup to get that music gone for a second, so I don't have to be talking over that. Moving on, we have another system. Oh, actually, one second, I meant to show the code. Here we go. I don't think it's in there. Sounds. Audio player. It's very simple. I'll just show only this. I hide these in the inspector because I want them to be public visibility with my scriptable objects. I'm not super worried about those. Maybe in the future I will have completely changed my mind and decide that these should never be public, even in a scriptable object, but for now they are. They're hidden in the inspector again because I have a custom inspector and I don't want these fields to show up because I actually draw the initial half of the inspector to get these audio clips array just to save some work. And here you can see it's very simple code. That's very much what they did at Unite. But I can show the actual editor for it over here. And I have it to where it serializes these properties. Originally I didn't do that, and it didn't always save, and that was very annoying to do some iteration in play mode testing and then find out, oh, nope, didn't save. So I have those being serialized and written back to the object down here. But over here, I work directly on the object itself and then apply the serialized fields back to it. And here's the drop-down button. I don't have a special graphic, so it actually has that little tick on the side for the drop-down. But it still works, so don't care. And over here, how it's essentially creating that, or playing those sounds in the editor, is it's creating a hidden game object in the hierarchy. And it does this as soon as it needs it. It waits until it actually plays to actually do that. And whenever you switch off the element, it will clean up that object so it's not just floating around somewhere. Moving on now, I have another system that I've written for this game. I believe it's in here, the Surface Manager. What this does is it stores it's an expandable list of all the kinds of surface in the game right now that have unique audio attached for when you walk and land on them. And currently climbing just uses the walk sound. It's a minor change that I have yet to make because it hasn't bothered me enough yet. And I have this set up a separate list for tile surfaces and for physics surfaces because the logic's a little bit different. And the reason that is because over here I have the jump pad, which doesn't use the tiles at all. It's a prop. So I've given it a physics material to identify it by. In the future, I may change how I identify non-tiled surfaces, but for now my physics material system is working for me, so I like that. It's why I created this is because originally when I wanted to play different sound effects when walking on surfaces, I had this switch statement to switch on these different conditions, and it wasn't very expandable. Here I can obviously just grow the list and then bam, new surface. Before, it took going into the code and editing it, and obviously that wasn't a system that I wanted to continue doing, so I refactored it very quickly into this new surface manager system. There's one problem with it right now under the tiles where it's not rename proof. If you rename the rule tiles over here, this surface manager won't update. So in the future, I'm thinking of making a custom property drawer, because these are actually stored in structs, and when it'll draw it, then what I want to do is have it to where you actually link the rule tile itself, and then it will always just grab the rule tile name out of the rule tile object that you put in here. That way it becomes rename proof, because inevitably things are going to get renamed. Someone is going to decide, grass and dirt, that's a terrible name. Let's name that just grass and have a separate tile for dirt entirely. And yeah, that would not be fun if they go in and do that without knowing how the Surface Manager utility works. And it'd just be a convenience if they didn't have to update it at all. So that's something I'm going to change in the future. You've already seen it in action, but I'll just show it again. There we go. You can kind of hear that playing. It's got a separate land sound. And you can hear it playing for the wood. Oh no, I died. You hear it playing for the wood. It has separate surface materials. If I were to go and just forcibly drag my player, I'm going to pause for this, over to the jump pad. This has already been shown in the video, but I'll show it again. It uses the jump sound because I thought that was appropriate. That might actually be a bug. I'll have to look into that. Anyway, moving on. Going over here in the player, I have the player settings. The reason I have this is to store all of these variables in one simple place where I can edit all of them. And specifically why I made this a scriptable object was because I'm using a class-based state machine for the character, and originally when it was just stored in the parent class, it would inject it into the subclasses that are the states when the states were created, but it wouldn't go through the trouble of trying to update them continuously, because I always knew I was going to make this player settings object, and now I've done that so that I can edit these settings and have them take effect in runtime to iterate very quickly, and it being a scriptable object, they're saved after runtime so that I don't have to lose all that work iterating and finding that just right value. So that saves me some time. There's not much point in looking at the code that makes it work, but I've just remembered that I haven't actually shown the code for the Surface Manager. Sorry, I'm new at this. So I'll just take a peek. I believe that's in there. Apparently not. It's in here. There we go. Open that. Very simple. It has two separate functions that both return the actual surface type as a interface, because all the audio really cares about is that it can play the sound. It doesn't really care if it was a physics surface or a tiled surface. So I have them implementing an interface, and it's pretty simple. Not much going on here. It's a very simple tool. I don't think I have a custom editor for that yet, so moving on from that, there's not much point in showing the player settings. It's just a whole bucket for some variables. There's one minor tweak that I've made to the rule tiles. If you notice, these are two separate rule tiles, and rule tiles by default will not connect like this. They only connect to other tiles that are of the same type as them. I'd not like that, because this would then become another edge block like that, and it didn't look like it was connected to the island. So I've made a minor tweak to the rule tiles to make that possible. In the future, I'll probably re-implement being able to have rule tiles that don't connect to just every tile that's neighboring them, as it is currently. But since it was just a one line of code tweak, I'm kind of putting that off because I don't need it right now. I'll get to it when I get to it. I have a music player system. is the next one to look at. This is fairly simple. I'm going to actually go to the splash screen to show this. Let that load. The music player has smooth transitions between all of the levels, and right now each level just has its own track, which is referenced against this array here. It currently is not build order independent. I'm thinking of making a scene manager system so that I can make a more meaningful connection, or change this to have a dictionary that actually gets serialized so that I can link a scene as a key and the correct music track or sound to be played as the actual value. But I haven't gotten to that yet. Again, haven't needed it quite yet, and there's been a lot to do. Apparently that's a spelling error. But if I play this really fast, there are smooth transitions, as you can kind of see right when I loaded the sample scene between all the levels. And I intend to use that smooth transition system later on for a dynamic music system to smoothly transition between the level sound track and a sort of combat soundtrack, and then smoothly transition out of that. And I can adjust the transition length and how many steps it takes. It uses a coroutine. I can actually show that off if I can find the code. It's under audio, scripts. Here we go. Music player. Over here, smooth transitions. It takes a time that you want the whole transition to take, as well as sort of a steps to take in making that transition. The time itself is pretty self-explanatory. This is how long the coroutine should run for, essentially, and the steps is more or less how the level of fidelity, sort of. A higher level of steps will be a smoother transition because it will go in smaller increments, whereas a lower level might be a bit more jagged, even if you have a particularly high time. I think especially if you have a particularly high time, it would be particularly noticeable. And that's how that works. And there's one other system that you saw me turn off earlier, which is the session mockup. And the music players don't destroy on load, and it's created in the splash screen and only in the splash screen. So if you ever get to a level that you're trying to test and the music player doesn't exist, but you want to have it in there so that you can actually test the sound effects as they're playing against the music to see how it goes relative to that, I have this mock-up that just says, oh, is there a music player in the scene? Nope. Well, better create it. And how the music player works, it will always grab the right track for the level it's currently on first and play that, so that I can have it, instantiate it if it's not existing, and I'll turn that back on. Already did. And right on the start of the level, creates the music player over there and loads the correct track. And that's it for the internal systems. I'll be doing another video shortly on the player's finite state machine and how that all works and comes together, and I'll take a much more in-depth look at the code over there. So that's it for now. Mark signing off.